So yeah, also welcome from my side. So as Taka already said, my name is Florian Stahl. I'm right here in Germany. And I will tell you a little bit about the updated version of the OWASP top 10 privacy risks today. So I don't want to tell you too much about myself. I have, I would say, a rather classical career in information security privacy. I'm rather coming from the technical area, did penetration tests a while back, and now I moved more and more to the security management area. Back in 2014, I founded this OWASP Top 10 Privacy project together with a colleague, and yeah, I still lead it today. And we thought it's time to update it because it's been a while, and that's what I'm going to tell you today about. So, well, what is the privacy situation in the world at the moment? So I have a few words put on this slide, and of course privacy is about personal data, so data that is about you, about me, about individuals. In the English speaking area, we rather talk about personal identifiable information, which is not the same but similar. And then we are facing several challenges at the moment. I mean, there is regulation out there like GDPR, like CCPA, and in other countries there are similar regulations, but this regulation maybe is not perfect yet. You've seen, you might know Max Schrems, the privacy activist from Austria, that and the European Court just decided that the GDPR or the transfer mechanisms to third countries are not really appropriate. Also, one reason for that is because there are still secret services that violate fundamental rights by doing surveillance because they want to avoid further terror attacks, even though it's maybe not sure if they're succeeding with this surveillance. And then, of course, we have a global world. So even though we have already regulation that is maybe valid in more than one country, we still have different regulations all over the world, but we have one global internet. And of course, then we also need somehow global standards. And that's also what we're trying to establish with this OWASP Top 10 Privacy Risks project. Then there are internet technologies. And I think most of you know that surveillance is the business model of the internet, and your data, if you're on Google, on Facebook, and so on, is the things that they sell to advertising, and that this is kind of how these companies earn their money. And at the same time, what I experience in many different companies, there's still a lack of implementation of privacy in practice, not only because people do not want privacy or do not want to implement, also because there are still too little people that know how to do it, because I think it's not so difficult, but many do not know how to implement it. Yeah, but it's not only about the companies, maybe also the authorities should improve still the enforcement of the regulation that is out there. I mean, we have still many open court cases. We have situations like maybe at the moment that is not directly related to web application, but there are self-driving cars that record their surroundings with a camera. This is also a really an issue for privacy, and there are always new technologies that have also to be considered by the regulators. And in the end, we also have, of course, strong lobbyism, because these business models, if privacy will be enforced really hard, let's say, is of course threatened by huge global companies, social networks, search engine providers, and they invest a lot of money to avoid that regulation and also enforcement gets too strong. So this is the situation, and now let's come to the OWASP Top 10 Privacy Risks project. Some facts and figures. So as I mentioned, we started back in 2014. We founded this project, and we published version 1.0, also together with the University of Applied Sciences in Munich. And this was an earlier time in privacy than now. Now privacy has matured. And then we also got contacted by the European Data Protection Supervisor that founded the Internet Privacy Engineering Network. We became part of that, and that helped us to also distribute this message. And of course, it's not only about privacy risks, because if you know your risks, it's good, but you still have to do something against your risks. And that's what we trying to help with the countermeasures that we published in 2016. And then in the beginning of this year, we published version 2.0, and I will tell you more about that later. Currently, we're working on the countermeasures of version 2.0, and the project is available in 5 languages. Soon it will be available in 7 languages, and we have the OWASP lab project status. And of course, you find a lot of more information on the project website as well. So what is the goal of the project? We want to identify the 10 most important technical and organizational privacy risks for web applications. So it's not only about technology, because technology can help to establish privacy, but in the beginning, you also might have to do some design, some business decisions. And so there are technical topics that help to improve privacy, but also organizational topic. And the top 10 project shows both of them. And it was important for us also to provide transparency about privacy risks, independent from local laws, independent from that, what maybe huge companies think, because I think there are many privacy risks that are not really considered a lot in practice yet. And we also wanted to keep it, as I mentioned before, there's a global world, there's a global internet. We do not want only consider one certain law. We want to consider it as a best practice for privacy in web applications, let's say worldwide. And if you see these OECD principles here, those principles are also part of many regulations and laws. So this is nothing really new for those of you who have already dealt with privacy before. Yeah, and of course, then we also want to show countermeasures. We want to educate developers, business architects, but we also want to help legal, those people who are often responsible for privacy and data protection in companies that maybe do not have so much of an idea how to implement privacy in practice. We want to help them, give some guidance, easily understandable guidance, how they can improve privacy in practice in web applications for real and not only on paper, let's say. What is not in scope in the project is self-protection for users, because we think it's not in the responsibility of the user to install some tools on their browser, on their PC to protect their privacy better, because this is something that maybe we as security or privacy experts can do, but for the normal user, this is very hard. And in the end, to be honest, it's kind of nearly impossible to really protect privacy. You might improve privacy by installing these tools, but it's very hard really to protect everything. And that's why we think it's in the responsibilities of the application providers to protect our privacy. Yeah, a few words about the method that we used. So of course, there was some kind of scientific model behind it. We took the OECD privacy principles as a baseline. And then we identified 20 different potential violations. In security world, you would probably call them threats, but in privacy, it's rather already violations. And these violations were then rated with a, let's say, classical risk rating by combining the impact with the frequency of occurrence. And then we got this rated list of privacy risks, and we took the top 10 as the OWASP top 10 privacy risks. Of course, there are more than 10 risks, and on the website, there is also the list provided with the risk number 11 to 20. But I think it's already, most companies, I mean, they already take 1 or 2 steps forward if they take the top 10 risks seriously. And I think it's also very important for the success of these OWASP top 10 projects, not only the privacy risk project, but also the classical top 10, that it's kind of simple and it's not too much, because if it's too much, then it might overwhelm the developers or whoever has to implement it. And then in the end, of course, we also evolve countermeasures and best practices. So to evaluate the frequency of occurrence, of course, the idea at first was to take some statistical data, but we recognized that it's still very hard to get real statistical data about privacy violations, because companies are not very keen on publishing them. And even though even authorities do not have too much data about the root cause or the reasons why data protection or privacy incidents have happened. So we decided, like back in 2014, to make a survey among experts, and we, in the end, 60 experts participated and rated how often these violations occur in websites. The impact rating was done by an expert judgment, and we took the application operator perspective with 30% of the impact, with impact on reputation and brand value and also financial loss, and 60% the data subject perspective with impact on social standing, reputation, financial well-being, and also personal freedom. So now let's have a look at the results of this of the updated list, and you can also see how things changed since 2014. And you can see the first 3 risks did not change: the web application vulnerabilities, operator-sided data leakage, insufficient data breach response. But the 4th risk is very new, and I will say a few words about this later on. It's consent on everything. Then we also have non-transparent policies, terms and conditions. Still, but a little bit lower rated, the insufficient deletion of personal data. I think this is now also part of many regulation. Maybe this is why the risks decreased. Then another new risk is insufficient data quality. And then we have missing or insufficient session expiration, inability of users to access and modify data, and the collection of data that is not required for the user consenting purpose. We also added here what you can see in the right column, if it's an organizational or a technical risk, because this was sometimes criticized about the first version, that we did not have give a hint if this has to be directed to the developers or it's rather an architectural or business topic. So we added this if it's a technical or organizational risk. So now I will say a few words about some of those risks, but we don't have the time to go through all of them in detail. But as I mentioned, there's more information on the website, and you can also find this presentation with some more details on the project website. So yeah, just because it's the #1 and it's still the #1, I want to say a few words about web application vulnerabilities, which is basically what the classical OWASP top 10 project addresses. And it's it's still also a very high risk to privacy, because if you have vulnerabilities and if there's personal data processed in your web application, of course, this is a risk that it can get hacked. And you probably know what to do against it. You can perform penetration tests. You have to train your developers. You have to apply secure coding guidelines, like from OWASP or some others. And of course, patching is also still very important. If your software is out of date, there might be vulnerabilities, and personal data could be easily accessible from those who shouldn't get access to it. Well, a very interesting new topic, and one that I personally also think is very important, and that I like that it's quite high on this new list, is the topic of consent on everything. And you probably, I mean, which web application, social network, search engine you use, usually click one time on consent, and then you accept that your data is used for profiling, for everything. It's transferred to 100 other sub-companies or other companies. And as a normal user, you cannot really estimate if this is appropriate or not, or if you really want to be transferred to all of these companies. Maybe you would rather prefer that it's only used for a certain purpose, for the use of social network, for communicating with your friends, but you don't want that it's used for advertising purpose. But you don't really have a choice. And this is something, I mean, the current regulation is often based on consent, a lot on consent, but there is also a very good talk on the post-consent privacy from Helen Nissenbaum. She's not in technologies, but she's rather somebody about who talks about social things and so on. And she says consent doesn't work, and we need some other regulation, like we have it maybe for phone companies, and phone companies are not allowed to listen to what people talk on the phone. And she says social networks, search engine providers should not either be able to listen to at least not to the sensitive data that we are looking there and that we are providing there. And there should be some more rules, and the consent should also be voluntarily, and you should, or the regulator, the states should restrict data flows, and because otherwise these companies get too powerful and they have too much influence on our minds, on the politics, on everything. And yeah, I think this makes sense. I think we are also still far away from having that really, but yeah, if you like it, think about it, share it, maybe discuss about this concept. I think it would be very helpful to improve privacy. Yeah, one more new topic is insufficient data quality. Might not be a privacy topic at first. You might rather think confidentiality is important for privacy. But of course, if your data is not correct, think about your credit rating might not be correct. Your package might not be delivered to the correct address, and so on. So data quality is also very important when it comes to privacy. So it's important that your data is up to date and correct. That there are possibilities that you can update your personal data in this web application, but also that the provider or the web application that if they transferred your personal data to third parties, and if you update your data, of course you also have to provide this updated data to those third parties. Yeah, and then the eighth risk, still one of my favorite risks, is the missing or insufficient session expiration, because this is something that is hardly discussed. This is not part of any regulation or laws, but still, I mean, one of the first lessons you learn as a security expert for web applications, you need an appropriate session timeout. I think we all know that. Banking sites, of course, have it, but if you have a look at social networks, search engine providers, and so on, they don't have it. And they have a well-hidden logout button. It's probably in the second level of the menu, and usually you don't log out. And what you see here on the right side are all the open sessions that I had with Facebook, because I logged in from some location close to my hometown at some point. And of course, you can manually and kind of complicated log out from these sessions, but it doesn't happen automatically. And that means at the same time that these providers are able to collect data from this device about you all the time. And of course, they do it on purpose because they want to have as much data about you as possible. And I think it would be helpful to have an automatic session timeout for these applications as well, or maybe at least that you can configure it and and activate it if you want to. Yeah, well, so much about the most important risks that I wanted to present you. And as I mentioned, there are some more details about the other risks on the website provided as well. I just want to spend a few minutes to talk about the challenges that we had in creating this version 2.0, because most of you usually only see the results. But of course, it's not as easy as some of you might think to get to these results at first. I think most of us are kind of busy. We have a job, and usually in security and privacy, there's a lot to do. And OWASP is a foundation of volunteers, of course. And you don't always have so much time for this volunteer work as you would like to. So we already started with work on version 2.0 in the beginning of 2020. Actually, we wanted to be done half a year later, but it turned out that it took more than 1 year until we had this version 2.0. And of course, it's also, I mean, I really like this event, this 20th anniversary event, and it's a global event, and it somehow connects the security people. And this was also done in this project. We had people from the US, we had people from India, we had people from all over the world that worked on this project. Core team about 5 or 6 people, but of course it's also challenging. Already when you want to have a phone call or a conference call, you need to find a time where everyone is awake, let's say. That's also why we worked a lot in Google Docs. So we commented in Google Docs, and we tried to improve solutions. We discussed also in Google Docs so that we had some, let's say, time independent working mode. And of course, in the end, we have very different people working on the project, which is also, let's say, an advantage, because everybody has a different mindset and brings in new ideas. But in the end, you also have to focus on the big picture. At some point, you have to bring these discussions to an end and find a consensus, and so that everyone agrees, and so that you can publish in the end this final version 2.0. I also had the feeling that it was harder to find volunteers than in 2014. Maybe it's because privacy experts are busier at the moment. And something that was also challenging, you might have recognized that some of the risks maybe are a little bit similar. And of course, there are overlaps between the topics, and it's also not easy to decide, okay, which topics can you merge and which topics can you separate? And also which abstraction level you take, because if you take very detailed risks, you probably would have a risk list or a violation list in the beginning of 50, but this will just be too much, and nobody will probably participate in a survey if it takes 2 or 3 hours, because you have to assess so many different topics, and it would just not be possible to handle this anymore. So this was also not that easy. Yeah, well, what are the next steps? I already mentioned we still are working on some translations. We are working on the countermeasures for version 2.0. Of course, everybody is welcome to join the project. We have a mailing list on the project website, and maybe even more important, spreading the word, bring it to your friends, to your colleagues, to your companies, and apply it in practice, because privacy only improves if we really implement these things and we do something against the risks. I know that it's not always easy, but still, I think, it's a little bit what we can do to make the world a little bit more safe, secure, privacy friendly. And yeah, that's what I'm also working on. And thank you very much for your also for your patience at the beginning, because we had some technical issues. Thank you very much for your attention. And as Takaharu mentioned in the beginning, I will be available on Slack for at least 30 minutes to answer your questions. Thank you.